And welcome back to another episode of Casey Campbell's Videocast. Of course, I'm Casey Campbell from Great Lakes Post. And once again, we are honored and pleased to be joined by the MHSA Executive Director, Mark Ewell. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time once again to join us.
You bet.
Of course, the MHSA made some more announcements yesterday regarding a few things. I'll get to some of them in a minute. But volleyball, boys soccer, and girls swim and dive have been approved for competition, but there is a catch to that. Kind of explain what that catch is.
So right now we've got 6 regions in our state to where indoor school facilities such as gyms and indoor pools are closed. We can't practice and we can't compete for that. So certainly we don't control that. That right now is because of an executive order through Governor Whitmer, who's doing everything that she can during the pandemic. But it was important. Our board is ready to move forward because we're hearing that our schools are ready to move forward with those sports. And it was important, I think, yesterday for folks to understand that we're not the hurdle and the obstacle here, that we're ready to go. We've had lots of conversations with the governor's office about this group of moderate risk sports. And the other issue here is with soccer, that, currently under Executive Order 160, that soccer competition can't take place because of the language that requires social distancing at all times. So these are issues that the governor's office has been aware of now for some time. And that we understand that we should have some more answers and direction within the week. And so we're continuing to work with that office to try and push to allow our kids in those 3 sports statewide to be able to move forward and to be able to play.
Now, Region 6 and Region 8, just to be clear to everybody, the Traverse City region is Region 6, the UP is Region 8. Both those regions have been approved for competition. Everybody else is basically is still in the holding pattern. They can still practice, but they basically have to wait on further action from Governor Whitmer. Now, there's also something that I want to ask you about. I counted about 10 schools, from what I understand, that have either decided to, okay, this is not safe, or we're going to take action ourselves. And I'm sure you know those are the 10 schools that have already moved boys soccer, volleyball, and girls swim to the spring, along with maybe even cross country golf or tennis. If we don't see any action from the governor's office next week, how long is the MHSA gonna be in this holding pattern until you guys take action, if you have to move everything to the spring?
Well, I don't think we've got a date in mind. Certainly the clock is ticking. I think folks now understand that the issues aren't in our building. They're not with our staff or with our board, that we're green lighting everything. And now it just depends on facilities opening for volleyball and for swim, and for that language and, the conflict in the executive order getting cleaned up. So that ball is no longer in our court. They've said within the week. So at least, Casey, we're going to give it the next week. And if we're still, not having any clear direction, or there doesn't appear that something is going to come quickly, then, as you and I have talked about several times previously, we're continuing to take things on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and we'll just make decisions based on the information we have at that time. But that's our plan here, Casey, for the next week. Hopefully that, what we've been able to share publicly is going to start to build some momentum, because with school facilities, we have nearly 80% of our schools, Casey, that are either starting fully face-to-face, or at least they're going to have kids on campus at least part of the time in some kind of a hybrid. So we've got to get our arms around school facilities in general with the academic day. And I think allowing small groups of kids to practice and play volleyball, as well as kids to swim, I think is right in line with schools opening for business.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is, if I can talk about about the 10 schools that did it, a lot of those schools are coming from the Lansing area and one particular conference, the CAAC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
For a team like I'll use DeWitt as an example. If someone, a lot of the teams in that, particularly the CAAC Blue, not pointing at DeWitt, but a lot of those schools have already moved to the spring. What can a school like that do if a lot of their schools in their conference have already moved to the spring? Do they have to go out and get opponents or something like that? But if we start seeing more schools decide to do this, what can schools do to make sure they have enough opponents?
So actually, for a lot of years, Casey, schools could have had a season at a different time than what we prescribe. So let's use volleyball for example. So let's say that you've got a group of schools and we'll just use the Lansing area, that they don't want to play volleyball in the fall because maybe they're starting all online or for other reasons, and they want to play that in the spring. Well, they certainly can do that in their spring season. It can't be any longer than what our fall season is. They can't play more matches or days of competition than what we allow. And the thing is, by them moving to a different time of the year, there's no postseason tournament experience for them to do that. So certainly in the case of a pandemic, schools could try and do something in the spring. What I'm hearing is what those CAAC schools will do is play a short season. It's not going to be the same length of regular season, but just based on where they're at as a school district, that's going to be their plan. It's allowed under our rules. The one exception to that is football, given the contact nature. Kids only get right now one football season in a school year. That's been a long-standing rule. So, and by the way, right now the executive order does not allow football activity to take place either. If soccer can't be played, that's the same pickle that football was in, to where that social distancing at all times, which was a huge factor in us making that decision on football.
Right. Let's get into football, because there was another announcement regarding that. The 16 contact practices and also 16 contact practices for spring sports. I'll get to spring sports in a minute, but I want to get to football for a second. When people talk about contact practices, that could mean a lot of things.
Sure.
For example, contact practices mean to some football players or some football coaches, could be with anybody. It could mean pads and hitting. It's not that case, I don't think, Mark.
It's not. In everything we put out yesterday, there's a big term that got left out of the question. It's coach-player contact days. It's not contact days, it's coach. So what we're allowing, normally in the off season, coaches can work with kids 4 at a time. So 4-player rule is what we often call it. So what we're allowing starting next Monday is, from next Monday through the end of October, our football coaches, because their season has been postponed, is they now have 16 coach-player contact days where they can work with more than 4 kids at a time. So what it could mean is that they could have a full squad workout. Now, also in that, there's a equipment limitation of helmets only. So that's all the player equipment that can be used. It's similar to what we've allowed every summer for as long as I've been on staff, which is 20 years, because we've heard loud and clear that, part of what kids need right now is some normalcy. They need that connection to their team for all the emotional and mental health issues. So by allowing them 16 dates to get together, because by the way, when we do start football next spring, certainly the weather at the start of the season is not going to be ideal. It's almost our current season in reverse. Right now, we start football, we often start in 80-degree plus weather, beautiful weather, and then we end in some kind of iffy weather when it comes to rain and sleet and snow and the temperature. Well, next year we're going to start in kind of a tough weather part of the year, but we're going to finish in good weather. So that was what we're giving football in the fall. And then starting on September the 8th, the Tuesday after Labor Day, we're going to give those same coach-player contact days to all of our spring sports. Those are the group that lost an entire season last year, and that's going to allow our coaches to work with their spring kids. And by only allowing 16 days in both of those groups, it's also going to allow kids who play football and also play a spring sport to be able to work with both their football team and their spring sport team. Hopefully coaches will work together and coordinate that and we just think that this is a good thing for kids.
Yeah, I just yeah, that of course those announcements are, very good in that fact of the matter because of the spring sports that were canceled. But one thing I do want to make clear: cross country, girls golf, and boys tennis, no matter where you are in Michigan, have been approved. Those seasons are good to go. You approved that back, I think, back on the 29th, of July, if I'm not mistaken. So those
It
three
was good.
sports are good to go.
They are good to go. Those were three sports that, in the ongoing conversations with the governor's office, those were all green lighted. They were told that those three, all the interpretations were that they fall all within the current executive orders, and they can move forward. So we had golf and tennis matches in our entire state that started on Wednesday. Cross country meets can get rolling here as of the 21st. So no, some good news on those sports, and hopefully more good news on that moderate group of three coming as well.
Any progress on a spring season? I know you can't really talk about what's discussed in those representative council meetings, but any progress you think on a spring sports season for football? Was there much talked about yesterday?
There was. So, yep, we're already talking about concepts. We're trying to identify the best window for football to fit and how we can do that with as minimal amount of an impact on winter and then especially on spring as possible. So I'm excited about some of the possibilities where this would be. It certainly isn't going to be a 9-week regular season and a 5 or 6-week tournament, but I do think that we can give a nice regular season experience and then also be able to finish the year with a playoff in some case, but yet still allow those football kids then to, as soon as their football season ends, to roll right into spring and be able to have a month to 2 month spring sport window as well. So our next step, we're going to put together a small task force. Our staff, the leadership of our high school football coaches association, a couple of our council members, and then our next step is going to be to make sure that we have input from the spring sport coaches associations, and then we'll take it out to our schools and get some feedback. And I'm hoping this whole process, Casey, we can have wrapped up by the end of September, and we'll everybody will know exactly what the spring is going to look like before the calendar hits October 1.
Another thing is that, we kind of talked about this earlier in the interview, but is there a scenario where now the Traverse City region and the UP, they're going to go with all fall sports, obviously not football because that was moved to the spring. Could we see a scenario where those two regions are going to continue in all sports, where the rest of the state has to, play in the spring or something like that? Could we see something like that?
You never say never to anything right now in the middle of this pandemic because you just don't know. And we certainly hope that's not the case. But again, I think, that would be a scenario that we'll have a much better idea next week. Because next week we are now getting into the August 20s dates. And, that as we start to get closer to September 1, we got to move forward if we're going to go this fall, and hopefully those hurdles get removed next week.
What's your message to all the boys soccer players, the girls volleyball players, and the girls swim and dive participants that have to wait on the governor's actions? Because this is a stressful time for a lot of people, and many are I'm going to say terrified about if there could be not a season in the fall because now it's in someone else's hands.
The thing I would tell them is just to keep hanging in there. It's been that same message. I think that's kind of the mantra that we've all had to live by because, we just can't make decisions by ourselves. We've got to work with other groups, other agencies to really find that right line of being able to get kids back to activity, yet doing it as safely as we can. So we just need help from Governor Whitmer and her office, and hopefully, those kids can transition from practice to competition here very soon.
All right. Mark Ewell, the Executive Director of the MHSAA, thank you so much for joining us once again.
You bet, Casey.